It's a show where we share experiences about men and for sorry, I missed that.
Is it sure? Purpose?
Is it sure?
Is it sure where? Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello there, it's me again, Kiki, and welcome to another episode of A Days with Kiki. A Days with Kiki, as you know, is a show that opens everyone up to the inner world of men. It's a show where men share their experiences for others to learn from. The purpose of A Days with Kiki is to give men a platform to reform the world's view about the male gender, mentor each other across the globe, and give clarity to questions fellow men, boys, or anyone could be asking about men. On this episode, we're going to be looking at some aspects of men's health, and we will be starting with stroke and how it affects the men. For that, I've got with me a very gentleman, Ade Williams.
Hello, Kiki.
Yeah, Ade is an independent prescriber and a lead pharmacist in the multi-award-winning Bedminster Pharmacy in South Bristol. Ade is an independent prescriber and a lead pharmacist at the multi-award-winning Bedminster Pharmacy in Bristol. He's here with me today and he's going to be telling us more about himself.
Hello,
Hi,
Kiki.
Ade.
How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming all the way. I know how long you drove to be here.
Hello, it's a pleasure.
I'm so honored. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell us a bit more about yourself?
So, I'm, as you mentioned, I'm a pharmacist. I'm a pharmacist independent prescriber. My pharmacy team and I have been pioneering some different ways of engaging with people. We're very proactive. For that, we've won a few awards. So one of the things I carry at the moment is I'm presently the Pharmacist of the Year for 2018 as well. I also have roles as well, working with the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, helping to raise awareness about the work the pharmacists do and pharmacy teams do in the community. I'm a fellow of that society as well for distinction in the practice of pharmacy.
Okay, so like we said earlier on, we're going to be talking about some aspects of man's health. And today we're starting with stroke. What is stroke?
What is stroke? That's a good point. So stroke is the loss of oxygen and nutrients to the brain. So it's actually cutting off the blood supply to the brain. It happens because of two particular reasons. You have a particular arteries. Arteries carry blood to organs and veins take them away. And the arteries that take blood to the brain sometimes can get blocked. They can have blood clots that stop the blood getting to the brain. Another thing that sometimes causes this is where you have a blood vessel in the brain that erupts as well. When one of the arteries erupts, and then you lose blood supply in there. You also have bleeding in the brain as well.
So what causes all of this?
What causes all of this? Now, there are some genetic factors that we are aware of. Realistically, for a population, what you tend to do whenever you're looking at health is you look at some things that are modifiable and some things that are not modifiable. So when we talk about the modifiable things, or we look at things like your weight. If you're overweight, you're more at risk of having a stroke. If you're Afro-Caribbean, you are more at risk of having a stroke. And that is particularly linked because there is also evidence that shows that people from African or Afro-Caribbean background have a tendency to have higher blood pressure, a lot of the time undiagnosed as well. So if you think about your blood pressure like as a water hose, if the pressure in that hose keeps building up, at some point it erupts. And that eruption is the stroke. Also, if you have a diabetes, you have a higher risk as well of developing a stroke as well. Drinking excessively and not exercising enough. All the things that we keep hearing about, and really are some of the modifiable factors that increase your risk of developing a stroke.
Okay, now you said more in Afro-Caribbean background, right? Yeah. Why is that?
Why is that? That's a good question. Why are we not? Now, it's something that has baffled scientists for a while. I think a lot of the time, really, particularly when it relates to stroke, the issue around it tends to be the blood pressure. Blood pressure itself, we believe that about 1 in 3 people that have high blood pressure in the UK are not diagnosed. Now, usually for ethnic minority groups across the board, that's even higher. Why? Because blood pressure tends to be sometimes be you have no symptoms. So because you have no symptoms of it, you go about having a high blood pressure. And the only time it becomes a problem is actually when something goes wrong. And, and heaven forbid what goes wrong is a stroke. And then you have it. So we know that there's some genetic disposition as well to high blood pressure in Afro-Caribbean people. We also know that the rates of picking them up and screening them is not as good as other people in the general population as well. And that's because over the age of 40, from 40 to 74, the NHS offers something that's called a free health check. And every 5 years, you're supposed to come in and they check your blood pressure, they check your cholesterol. And we have found that a lot of people in those minority groups tend to be less likely to turn up, especially men. The two men, they're hustling, they're trying to take care of their family. They don't, and they feel well. And I think that's the problem with it, is that you feel well, you don't. Also, we're not very good with our family history when it comes to health. Somebody dies, they go, he's died. What happened? Nobody knows. So you don't have a traditional or culture of sharing health information that lets people to know that, oh, your dad had high blood pressure, your uncle had a stroke, so be careful. So you tell you don't do that there. And I think the other thing that sometimes does happen as well is that some of our diets are very high in salt content, and the high salt content, unfortunately, can contribute to high blood pressure as well. And the high blood pressure, of course, then contributes to the stroke.
Thank you for not saying carbs. Because that's what everybody says.
Well, the message around carbs is really one of trying to look at what the balance is. And I think the balance is really looking at the calorie content. How much are you doing, especially if you're not very physically active? And the problem sometimes is that people eat more when they're tired. And most people in many ethnic minority groups work a lot, they work long hours, so they eat more. But actually, they're not physically doing more. They're not having time to exercise. So what then happens is that you're taking in extra calories that you need. And that then becomes a problem with your weight. The stats about the weight for men is that if your waistline is above 36 inches, you're actually at higher risk of developing a cardiovascular problem.
Where's my husband's weight line?
Oh dear, you're gonna stick him on a diet now.
Of course.
Oh no, what have I done?
But my husband is very good with diets. In fact, he monitors me.
Oh,
he monitors mine. So yeah. But again, I want to ask. So now, talking about the fact that I know you're not a fitness coach, but how do we find we are men, or sometimes we rarely have time, for this exercises and all of this. What would you say are the barest minimum
that we can do? I think one of the biggest problems is that there's a group of us, and I think I've been guilty of this, that pay into gym memberships, they stay in our wallet or comes out in our diary. It comes every January, goes we've funded sports clubs, but we've never turned up. And I think one of the things we need to do is to be realistic. And I think what does that mean is there are some ways, that you can actually increase your physical activity that doesn't necessarily need to cost you more money. One thing that could be very helpful is to go and get a Fitbit. Great technology. You can look at how much steps you're taking, you look at the calories. It helps you can set targets as well. And what does it do? It means that you start to make choices when you're going into, because you've got a target of 10,000 steps today. When you go into the supermarket or you're at work, you decide to use the staircase instead of the lift.
Yeah.
Because you got a target, you get up from work, you think, okay, it's my lunch break, I'm going to just 10 minutes and walk around.
Yeah.
That's a very easy way. That's sustainable as well. It's very habit forming. The other thing that is also very good in terms of that is, again, is to not to look at your diet in terms of just trying to use it as a fad, but looking at it and actually thinking, what should I be eating more of? Fruits and veg, drinking more water is very key as well in terms of that as well. If you drink alcohol as well, being conscious of what is the recommended limit and staying within that. Certainly, smoking never gives anybody any benefit, and I think that's something today that if you find yourself that it's a habit that you have, seek help to try and quit it, because there is no there. So there are those things that you can do. Look as well into frying your food, trying to maybe look at cutting out deep frying, looking at maybe air fryers as well, and grilling things. And but it's those sort of changes that makes your diet better, makes you yourself feel better. And the good thing about increasing your physical activity, it makes you feel better as well, and you look better.
I agree with you. And well, I'll just add to the tips Ade's giving. Help out in the kitchen.
Yes, that's good. Yeah.
Because in the kitchen, you move around a lot. And another tip is take a walk with your loved ones.
And do your housework. Do the hoovering. It's amazing. If you do the hoovering and cleaning, you burn out almost 1,000 calories.
Exactly.
You can listen to music, you can dance. It's the only thing you can do when you're dancing around to yourself and those around you ignore you because they're just happy you're doing it. So put on headphones, do your hoovering and spin around. Yes.
Okay, so stroke, when it happens, is there any form of recovery, physical recovery?
There is. And there is something that I need. It's very important. There's a little acronym that we have for stroke, which is called FAST, the FAST. And what it is that if the first thing it talks about is the first symptom of a stroke. If somebody is the face, you sometimes see that the face, one side of it seems to have dropped. The eyes may have dropped. The lips may have dropped as well. Those are common features of that. Is where somebody cannot. They say that I don't feel the side of my face. The other one that comes out as well is the arms as well. The person is unable to raise the two arms because usually one of them is very weak, keeps dropping down. They have no response to it, so they're not able to. The other one as well was S, which is for the speech. And what happens is the person sounds quite inaudible. They are babbling. They cannot form their words as well. Sometimes when you speak to them, they're not responding. The last one is time. And what that is really is to say, if you see somebody there, you need to act very quickly. You need to call 999 and think, I think this person has had a stroke. Because the earlier they can get medical attention, the quicker it is, the better the outcome is going to be for them. Okay. In terms of how the rehabilitation works, when you get into hospital, what they will try and do is to find out whether it's one of the two things that's happened there, whether it's the hemorrhaging, which is the blood vessel that has erupted, or it's a clot, and they will then look at the processes to try and alleviate either of them to limit the damage that can cause. The other one that is also worth mentioning is that some people have what is called a transient stroke. So they have a passing thing. So for a few minutes, they have all of those symptoms, and then they seem to get back again. And for those ones, that is actually quite important that they see their doctor, because the transient stroke can be a precursor. It can be a warning that there's a big stroke coming. So, and there are tests that you can do, there are blood tests that you can do that can say you've had a mini stroke. So we can now do something to prevent a major stroke as well.
So if you feel at some point you couldn't speak properly, or you couldn't raise
losing
up your
strength
arm,
in your arms,
or your face,
your speech, or your face,
not the way it used to be,
it's what to act
on time.
That's it. Yes.
Don't wait for anybody. No. Act on time. Even if you feel okay, I'm good, just go for the check.
Yeah, if you see somebody, pressure them. You're saving a life.
Okay. So now, finally, on stroke, how can we reduce the risk?
How can we reduce the risk? I think one of the things is to make sure that, particularly for men, we're checking our blood pressures. We need to do that, especially if you're in one of the at-risk ethnic groups, minority groups in particular. If you have diabetes, if you know that your weight is higher than what it should be, you're at a greater risk. So check it. Do something about the weight, but keep checking it as well. If you have a family history of cardiovascular problems, certainly look at reducing your alcohol consumption if you drink. Look at the same point as well of giving up smoking if you do smoke as well. And I think the other thing that is what also doing is actually also, particularly for men, increasing awareness, letting people know what stroke is. Stroke is the leading cause of disability. And I think that's the worst part of it. It's not that you can survive, but then you are left with a disability. And that the loss of income, the pressure of your family having to care for you. And we know that many patients that have a stroke also go through really bad bouts of low mental health as a result of that, because you feel as if your dignity and your person has been locked. Yeah. And I think we can do something. But the good thing is that the rehabilitation that is available is there. And one other thing I would say, if you're taking blood pressure medications, keep taking them. Don't stop, and go for your regular appointments as well. I think those are some of the things that really we find that really lets us down, is where we are not taking the medications, we're not going to check that it's working, and we just assume that everything is okay.
Yeah. And then you mentioned earlier on exercising, doing physical activities, and watching your diet. So that means our diet has got a key role to play.
It has got a key role. It has got a key role. And I think, sometimes, like in every society, in every culture, there are things that we do that we've always done, and some of it may not be as healthy because we're not as active as we used to do when it was passed over to us. Yeah. So I think what we do is we modify our life, modify the diet. You can have the same things, but you don't have to deep fry it anymore, or make the deep frying the treat. not something that you have every single day there, and I think it's
Remember
just
growing up, my mom would say that my grandfather would have pounded yam every day. But yeah, that's a good one. But then he goes to farm
every
day.
single day. So
he
you
does the farm work, and after the farm work, his treat is that.
it
Yeah. So
is.
like you said, the lifestyle has changed. So modify what you do. It doesn't have to be the way it used to be. That's a very quick one. But thank you very much, Adi. It's loaded. One thing I want to add to what Adi said, he said, check your blood pressure regularly. There is this blood pressure monitor that is sold on Amazon. I think it costs less than £12.
There is. You can also get free ones done in your GP surgery, your pharmacist. You can go in and ask for it. They can interpret it for you, and you can do things to improve your blood pressure as well. So don't be scared that once you have high blood pressure medications, you can actually, it can be a wake up call. And I think ultimately it's better to be woken up about the condition than to be woken up about a stroke.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Yes, thank you so much. Please stay tuned. We will be back very shortly. Thank you. Welcome back to A Date with Kiki, and thank you so much for staying tuned. Now, we started off with stroke, and I still have Ade here with me. We've talked about stroke, the causes, and how to prevent it. And while you were talking earlier on, while we had the conversation, you said stroke is one of the causes or could lead to mental health.
It can do.
What's mental health?
It's mental health. So one of the things that is really changing in all our societies is that for a long time we just used to focus on how you are physically, but now we are also much more conscious of how you are intellectually and emotionally as well. And I think really when we talk about mental health, we're looking at your intellectual and emotional well-being. And the reason why I mentioned stroke is that many people that have long-term physical conditions find that the way they feel and the way they think about themselves is not the best. So that itself is something that they may need help with and support to get over, because there is actually a link. If your mental health is not very good, your physical health keeps going down. And then if your physical health keeps going down, your mental health keeps going down.
Yeah. So how about the stigma that comes with mental health? Growing up in Africa, when you see somebody is mentally ill, the person is mad.
Yeah. And I think one of the, sadly,
sorry to cut you. We're talking about African men or Black Afro-Caribbean
exactly.
men, and then you're saying I'm mentally ill. You're saying I'm mad.
I think one of the first things really, whenever we're talking about mental or ill health, is that we are very careful now about, like you said, what we're talking about and what that means. So we don't use phrases like mental sickness anymore, but actually we talk about mental well-being. And what we're then trying to say is that this is who you are anyway. You're a person that's got your physical, your emotional, your intellectual, and if any of those is wrong, you as a person, deserves to get better. But that is normal. So we know statistically that at any point in time, one out of four of us in any room in the course of a year will go through a period of some sort of mental crisis. That could be depression, that could be anxiety. It's right. We'll bounce back sometimes without any help. That's our resilience. But sometimes as well, we have mental conditions like psychosis, which is usually some of the ones that we see out in our culture. And a lot of that is things that happen where the communication and chemicals in the brain are somewhat misbalanced, but they can be corrected. But unfortunately, because of the stigma and the ignorance, and maybe also the lack of availability of that sort of medical help, what has happened then is that we have seen that as a hopeless situation. Meanwhile, there are lots of great examples of people that live with mental health conditions and are fine. They're functioning, they're successful, they're contributing into society. Yeah. So the culture is also changing now. We are seeing that, but there's still work to do, particularly in minority communities, definitely.
Yeah, and particularly changing our perception or the way we perceive what mental illness is. Oh, thank you very much. Now, what are the difference in the risk for in terms of mental illness for men and women? Okay. Are there any difference or what to keep?
I think women, we know that women have much more mental health challenges. Part of that is also linked to hormonal changes as well, and how that affects the mood and affects the intellect as well. And so there is some of those changes that exist. We know that for men, the difference tends to be that while we have less men that have problems around their mental well-being, there are less men that seek help. So the tragedy of this, and what really brings it to mind, is that if you look at any suicide record, out of every 10 people that kill themselves, 8 of them are men. And that's really because when we start to think, why are men not engaging? And we can immediately see why that is so difficult. Is particularly for minority men, with the societal expectations, with the connotation that is some sort of brokenness, some sort of something's gone wrong with you, some man, wants to pull yourself together. So when even whatever extreme you're looking at it from just anxiety and depression to things like psychosis, it's all, you have this message that says, hide it, get over yourself, fix yourself, don't tell anybody. So what does that do to you is that you get very hopeless. And I think one of the things that I feel that's important for us as a society is really to start to say, no, that's not true. Because if that's how our men are treating themselves, is by killing themselves, then something's wrong there. And that statistic is not changing.
If this is what's happening to our men, and what's the risk factor now to the men in terms of mental illness?
I think for men, in terms of mental illness, some of the things that what we try to do is to try and teach people what promotes good mental health. Some of that is actually social interaction, interacting with people, being able.
But you men don't talk.
That's it. So there is a big campaign. It's called "It's Good to Talk." And I think that's really where it's also important for fathers and role models and uncles to do that, because a lot of the time what we tell young men is about our expectations and our successes. We never tell them about weaknesses or failures. So when they think, why am I weak, or why am I failed at something, they feel that, oh, actually there's something wrong with me. So we need to change that culture. We need to have male role models that champion that as well. We need to also look at also how we create cultures of giving as well. So some things that help to improve your mental well-being is giving. Find a way to give. Give up your time for somebody. Get involved with something. Learning as well. That's important. Keep learning. Learn something. Learn something that's fun for you. Learn something that social interaction, social connections are important as well. Another thing that we also encourage is sports and activity. If actually there is clear evidence that if you engage in any sports or exercise or things, it releases hormones in your body that lifts your spirit, lifts your moods as well. And then finally, we also want you to be mindful, and that is live in this moment, especially in the social media age. You can look at your life and compare it to somebody on Instagram and feel as though, wow, look at me and and actually look at yourself, look at where you are and be thankful for that. And that's a big thing now. It's actually creating a conscious of mindfulness, and you can get an app on this. You can have internet programs that just teach you about being mindful, because one of the things that does is that it makes you become a much more resilient and secure person as well.
Wow, thank you very much for that. These are lots of things we need to pay attention to. Be giving. He said something about giving, and that giving actually gives you joy. Giving your time, role modeling somebody, and then speaking up. Earlier on, I was talking to a group of men, and we were talking about, there is it's not a bad thing to speak up.
No,
it's not. It doesn't. Manliness doesn't mean I am sufficient for myself. Because I said to my children, I've got 2 boys, and I said to them that we are created as relational beings. You cannot survive by yourself. You need people around you, and that's why you need to be able to communicate with people, make good relationships that you have around you. And I think that would help mental illness.
It would do.
A great deal. Thank you very much. Now, another question I've got for you. Cure.
So what is the cure? I think the first thing to say is that like just like we're speaking about physical ill health, mental ill health can certainly be helped. There is lots of different things that happen. There's some therapies that exist that are not medical based or pharmacological based. It's talking therapies. It's thinking about cognitive behavior. That is behaviors and patterns of thinking and doing and approaching things that protect your well-being as well. So another thing that's really good, like I mentioned about exercise, is actually just spending time in daylight, because evidence shows that in the winter months, everybody feels down, but for some people, it really can become a crisis. So what we do say is that if you work in a building, or if you're spending time in your room at home, playing your game, go out and just spend 1 hour, 40 minutes, 30 minutes, go out there and get that, because that does something not just for you in terms of how you look, which is actually good to spend time in the sunlight anyway, but more importantly, it releases chemicals, it releases hormones that make you feel better. And also, if you're taking medication for your mental health, don't see it as get over the stigma. A lot of the time, particularly for minority groups, they're very, very bad at keeping to take their medications as well. So what then happens is that you're getting progressively worse. And psychosis, when it's not controlled, some of the examples that people see is, particularly in developing countries, is because either the absence of medications for different reasons, or people who don't take medication. And what then happens is, like any other a condition, you're getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and the point of trying to draw you back to where you can be becomes much more difficult for you as well. And also take care of your physical health, because we know that if you are physically better, you are more likely then also to be able to be more resilient and cope with your emotions. But if you don't take care and you get yourself into a bad physical state, whether it's from hypertension or diabetes, you are also then making yourself more vulnerable to mental ill health as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So be active, get out into the sunlight, enjoy your life, dance. I love to dance, and I say dance. Yeah, play music. You said something earlier on about playing music. I think that was when we were talking about stroke. Play music and dance.
And all that is being mindful.
Exactly.
Enjoy your moment.
Yeah, enjoy your moment. I like that. Enjoy your moment. Do something fun. Nowadays, we see women doing things with themselves, going out to help themselves. I think we need such forums for men, where men are able to talk to themselves, be open and enjoy their life, not just drinking now.
No. I think, and I think that's important as well, is to realize that actually alcohol itself is a depressant, So what happens is, if you drink alcohol, you have a very slight peak, and then you really go down, because it is a depressant. So that is it. So the euphoria that comes from it is very little, but then it keeps sinking you down, and that's why you keep going back to it to try and get that little euphoria, but you keep sinking down and keep sinking down there as well. And also, we also have to be, especially in an age where things like cannabis and and recreational drug use is to remember that those things, we know that they will cause mental ill health. For some people, they say I'm fine, but the problem is we don't know those people that can't cope with it, but we know that it does. And again, particularly psychosis is very, very much linked to using, things like cannabis, illicit drugs. There is that as well. And so again, just being really conscious about some of the societal pressures and societal perceptions, but doing the right things, connecting with your family, your friends. And for men, talk, because actually that person you're talking to, you're the only one. Don't ask closed questions. Ask open questions. Don't say you're okay, aren't you? No, ask how are you doing? How is everything going? I think that makes a lot of difference.
Okay. So now, finally, how do we promote the awareness of mental health?
So
particularly amongst men.
Particularly amongst men, I think everybody's got a big role in this. We got families that've got a big role in this. I think we also have faith communities, churches as well. Because I think again there is sometimes, particularly for minority ethnic groups, there are embedded cultural perceptions, and connotations that we need to come and address. We also need to teach people about balance, because one of the things that really can cause mental ill health is stress and pressure. And sometimes people put stress and pressure from them, trying to live up to the expectation, the societal expectation, So they're hustling, they're sleeping less than 6 hours, they're working all the days, they're doing, they're rushing, they're trying to make as much money, and they are really getting down and really depressed and getting there. So I think we all have all of those things to do. I think we also need to come in and say, when we find somebody that's not doing too well, we must be ready to support them through. So maybe if somebody's not looking, not doing too well, offer to go with them to the appointment, because maybe they're so terrified of sitting there, sitting with a doctor and talking to a doctor about it. But if you're there for them, you're supporting them, and that could make all the difference. And never tell somebody, just go and fix yourself. Mind our language, mind our language, because like anybody else, when you're most vulnerable, that's when you are most sensitive. So let's just mind our language as well, and create a culture, particularly for men, where it's okay for us to say we're not okay, but also it's okay for us to receive help.
Particularly for men, ask for help. It's okay to say you're not okay, because when you say that, it creates room for you to be okay. Thank you. Finally, what do you think we could do to improve mental health and well-being in men?
Amen. I think a big part of that is to look at how, and I'm really thankful for some of the things you're doing, the networking around trying to get men to talk together, trying to get men to open up, to spend time with other men. I think those are key. I think we need to do that. We need to do it because, for what we're seeing is that one generation could be more resilient than the next generation because the pressures of the next generation are always more, and we must lose sight of that we are building a stronger, much more better equipped generation after us. So the investment in terms of mentoring, time, breaking down the barriers, we can't just say, oh, this is how it is. No. How do we break them down? And it could be one little thing. Sitting down with your son or your nephew, asking how are they doing? Are they okay? How is life? How is school? And listening to them, and not just, setting the expectations, but asking them to give you the feedback. How are you coping with those expectations? And killing some of those expectations. You don't have to be first in the class. You can be second. You can do your best, and that's good enough.
Exactly.
And those things just lift the burden of somebody that thinks, I just want people to be proud of me.
They are young boys.
Yes.
And that's why they go out to seek comfort, because they can't meet the expectations we put on them.
Yeah.
They go out to seek comfort and then it goes wrong. Yeah. And then we're wondering what's wrong with our young boys. Thank you so much, Ade. In fact, this is one that I need to go and listen to over and over again, because I've got young men. Well, I'm the only woman in my house, so I've got men all around me. So I need to listen to it, not just for the people in my own house, but people around me as well. And then, yes, I know I said lastly, but one more thing. What symptoms do I need to watch out for?
Good point. And I think some of the symptoms that we are conscious of is where you find someone that's not sleeping very well. People that are not bothered anymore. They're losing a lot of motivation to take care of themselves. That's another symptom that can be there. You can also find people that are eating excessively, drinking excessively. Their behavior becomes very erratic, or they're getting very, very forgetful as well. Those are kind of symptoms to say that there's something not really right here. And it could be something like just, a child going through exams is getting very, very anxious and he's getting very forgetful. He doesn't want to get out of bed. And you think, why are you not motivated? It could just be that he feels overwhelmed by the situation. And I think those are some of the things we just need to be conscious of.
Like you said earlier, the cure could just be listening.
Yes.
Asking open questions and listening to the child. Thank you so much, Ade. This has been very educative.
Thank you very much.
I love you for this.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, viewers. Thank you so much for staying tuned. I'm sure you'd agree with me that we've really learned a lot today. At some point, I think I should bring Ade back.
I'm more than happy.
He drove like God knows how many hours to get here. But looking at him now, I'm kind of tying him into it that he has to do it again, because we need to deal with it.
It'll be a pleasure. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, viewers. And I'll see you soon again. Thank you. Bye. Love you.